Catholic Charities of Santa Clara County presents Change Lives for Good with your host, Greg Kefferly.
Welcome to our Aging University and our focus on policy and our policy compendium on aging. We have a terrific panel with us today with Senator Jim Bell and some experts in the field from Insight Center and Justice and Aging. They'll be introduced a little bit later. But first, I just want to thank all of you for being here and for your passionate concern about our seniors. All of us are getting older. I think we're getting older faster because time is speeding up the older I get. I realize that I have this new theory of relativity. And I want to really thank Block Construction for hosting us. I also want to thank Kaiser Permanente and El Camino Hospital for their sponsorship of this series and of this morning's conversation.
What is something that you worked on this year? Maybe it wasn't a win, but it was just something that you were absolutely proud of. So I'll start with Senator Bell again.
My view of housing is that we have to challenge this idea that everything can be taken care of by the private sector. For example, if you have a senior housing and somebody's on a fixed income, Social Security, SSI, you really need to have a stable rent level for that person. And look what's going on out in the community in the private sector for rents right now. The increases are way above what SSI, what Social Security increases give a senior for housing. So increasing of supply of housing built by nonprofit organizations, nonprofit housing organizations specifically for seniors, is something that I've been telling the legislature and other people is a way of long-term stability and value added over time for a senior in terms of their life, having that rent stabilize as much as possible.
So one thing that Justice and Aging has been working on recently, there's no victory here. On the federal level, the SSI Restoration Act was introduced last year, and we've been trying to garner support for it. And the purpose of the act is there's a lot of, in the SSI world and in a lot of the the poverty, legal services, anti-poverty work, there are a lot of rules around the benefit programs that come from 20, 30, 40 years ago, like the Maximum Family Grant, from some of them, like the Maximum Family Grant coming from just a very inhumane policy place. But then others, like the SSI program, was passed and then implemented in 1974. So a lot of the the numbers are coming from very long ago. So the SSI Restoration Act is trying to say, let's update those numbers to actually reflect today's financial realities. So a $20 income disregard in 1972 actually meant something that it doesn't mean today. Having a limit of $2,000 in assets may have actually provided some short-term financial stability in 1972. It doesn't today. And a lot of, when I was doing direct services in San Mateo County, anytime I had to explain this is this is the underlying law and the limit, it always had to be prefaced with, I know this is not going to make sense, but let me tell you what the limit is. And I think with the SSI Restoration Act and some other things that are happening, there's more interest and willingness to really talk about those and say, these don't make sense. Let's see, what can we do? What does make sense? And we're trying to, I think there's a little bit more willingness to talk about it, and we're trying to be a part of that and use the Restoration Act and build support for it, build support for just what it says.
In their last strategic plan, they realized the other thing they really wanted to do was raise awareness about senior poverty, because it really isn't an issue that I think a lot of people know about. I mean, all of you are in this room, which is amazing, but it's a drop, right, where we really need more people to be focused and thinking about it. So one of the things that I think Justice in Aging is particularly proud of is our campaign around raising awareness. And I think part of that is us coming to forums like this and talking to all of you, going to statewide aging forums, national aging forums, getting the word out there. We've also done a lot of work. If you want to go to our website, do a little plug here. We've been starting to produce videos to try to really give a name and a face and a story to senior poverty so that it isn't all about sort of esoteric, wonky, complicated policies. Like, this is a person, a human person who is really suffering because of those policies, or who really cannot afford food or rent or health care. You know, we have seniors who forego medicines they need, that they're prescribed, because they decide they'd rather eat. And that's real, right? So that's something that we really are trying to raise awareness for. And we're also trying to raise awareness around the fact that aging doesn't look the same for everyone, that communities of color, LGBT communities, might experience aging in a different way. So we're really trying to raise awareness. So I really hope people will go and watch our videos and, you know, share them and put them on. If you have good networks, like, send them out. We want this information out there. The other thing is a more policy wonky thing I'll talk about. IHSS, which is In-Home Supportive Services, is a program where the state can pay for people, and Tatiana sort of alluded to it, the state can pay for somebody to come in your home and help you if you cannot do everything yourself anymore in your own home, but you want to continue to live in your own home. So that might be cooking assistance, or grocery shopping, or personal care issues around all sorts of things, transferring, you know, walking, bathing, all those issues. That program was heavily targeted several years back for amazing amounts of cuts. At one point, it was a 20% cut. And you can imagine, if I'm a senior who needs a support, because the budget's terrible, does not mean I now need 20% less care, right? That's just not how it works. I still needed all that care, but now you're telling me I can't get it, or I can't get it paid for. So Justice in Aging, with other partners, we sued the state on those issues and said that wasn't a legal cut. And we were ultimately able to work out a settlement, and there's a lot of complication to that. But the end result was a settlement of a 7% temporary cut. And this year, the 7% reduction was lifted so that people are back to their full amount. So that's amazing, but it was only it's a temporary restoration, and we don't yet know if the state's gonna make it permanent. So that's something that we were very happy to see happen, but we really are hoping the state will move forward and make it a permanent restoration and not leave people questioning every year whether they're going to see sort of an arbitrary reduction of hours of care for them in their home, which really does make people unsafe. There's a reason they're getting the hours.
We're really huge advocates of really looking at these hidden truths, where we really can see how people are living that's really not brought to the public. This isn't so recent, but in the last couple of years, we worked with UCLA to produce a piece that really looked at mature adults living with their elderly and senior parents. And I've been speaking about this since this report has been published, because I don't think it really got enough attention. And it's so critical to think about someone in their 50s who's living with their parent who's in their 70s or 80s. And a lot of this drive, these are 433,000 families in California, and this number has increased primarily because of the economic position of mature adults and the fact that they have some of the highest unemployment rates, that they have some of the longest joblessness rates of any group. And the reason that I thought this was so critical is because this is a group who really expressed to us that they feel a great deal of shame. Here you are, 55, you're supposed to be in the prime of your working years, and you're living with your parents not because they necessarily need you to help them with their daily needs or with a health issue. It's because you yourself have experienced a great deal of wealth loss, and that you really lack income. You're really struggling. That means that you're also not able, this is the age, and some of us pretty know this, that you're the rock of your family, right? You have children that depend on you. And now you can no longer help your own child, and your mother or your parents' economic security is being jeopardized. And we found that when someone moves in with their parent, that their expenses go up 50%. And so their security is also being threatened. And so we just feel that it's so important for us right now in our state, given the changing nature of work, given changing different demographics and family structures, to really illustrate how this plays a role in older adults' economic security. Another area of work we've done is we've done these, for the first time ever, looked at wealth position of families by race for groups that there's no data that this exists at all, not nationally, nowhere. So when we think about the fact that our country and our state is so diverse, imagine that we really don't have data that drills down on Asian groups, for example. They're just lumped together. And so we did a study in LA that really looked at how people are faring. And we're able to drill down in groups that we've never ever seen data on before. And we saw huge differences. Just one quick statistic. When we think about people's family resources in LA, Japanese households had about $595,000 worth of assets that they can draw on in a time of need. Korean Americans who have, for many, many generations had businesses in LA, surprisingly had really low levels of wealth and well-being. So I'm saying this to say that we need in our state right now to understand how to be more effective in our advocacy, to understand what policies will make a difference. We need to know how people are situated. And we currently don't know that information, which seems kind of mind-boggling in some ways, but it really isn't something that we've invested in as a state, in terms of both foundation funding and government funding. So we're actually excited about the opportunity to bring to the discourse people's lived experience and uncover these kind of, families that are kind of almost living in the shadows because of these new economic arrangements.
Talk to us about what specifically happened that made it not get approved and made it not be a win for us. And then also about what can the public do? So how can we mobilize people to actually make these changes and support what we need?
Well, I'll keep on the theme of healthcare then. So going to Medi-Cal, I think one of the complicated things is Medi-Cal sort of is on the surface sort of one program, right? It's Medi-Cal, and do you qualify for Medi-Cal or not? But that actually isn't what it's actually a lot of programs that are very complicated that sort of in the front just look like a single program. So the program that supports most seniors is a free Medi-Cal program called the Aged and Disabled Federal Poverty Level Program. And that is free Medi-Cal, and when paired with Medicare, it actually provides fairly complete free medical insurance for seniors and adults with disabilities. And that includes long-term care, and includes long-term services and supports like in-home supportive services and adult daycare and other services that are sort of critical to keeping people in the community. What happens, however, is that there is basically a cliff above which you fall off, and you are now on something called share of cost Medi-Cal. And I'm just kind of curious, have any of you heard of share of cost Medi-Cal? No. Okay, so most of you not, right? Because I think a lot of people assume if you're either on Medi-Cal, it's free, or you're not on Medi-Cal, but that's actually not true. You can be on Medi-Cal with what's called a share of cost. And what a share of cost is, it's basically like a deductible gone crazy. So what it means is every month, I have to meet my share of costs before Medi-Cal pays for any of my services. So let's just take, for example, if I went to that $20,000 hospital bill, well, let's make it a little less. Let's be not quite so crazy. I had a $1,000 medical bill, and Medicare paid for, say, 800 of it, and 200 you would hope Medi-Cal would cover, but actually, my share of cost might be $700 a month. So I have to pay that $200. And if I have in-home supportive services that's worth $1,000 a month, I have to pay $700 or $500 if I've already paid the $200, and then the state starts paying the rest. So it's a humongous burden. And what you have to understand is the people on share of cost Medi-Cal do not make $80,000 a year. They don't make $60,000 a year. You cap over the free Medi-Cal limit around $1,220 a month. And how this works, I'm getting really, really wonky into the numbers. We're having a fight over who can be nerdiest here. Is the maintenance need has not been raised since 1989, and it is $600 a month for an individual. So that means if I'm over the cap, let's say I make $1,300 a month in Social Security, I get that amount a month, I'm going to basically have a share of cost of almost $700 a month. I get $1,300 a month and I'm supposed to pay for my housing, food, all these medical bills, transportation, and other life things, right? I have to buy toilet paper, I've got to buy, I've got to get places on the bus, I've got to maybe help my daughter out when she needs a little bit of money, and I've got these huge overriding medical expenses. So share of cost Medi-Cal is just a gigantic problem that isn't easily solved. But one possibility, and that has sort of been put forward by Western Center on Law and Poverty for the last couple of years, is to raise the limit at which you fall off that cliff, so that it's equal to what it would be if you were under 65, because right now you can be up to 138% of poverty and stay on free Medi-Cal if you're under 65, but the second you turn 65, you're basically at 124% is where you fall off. So there's an unfair and sort of fundamental unfairness there. And that's one solution, and that would be helpful, but it's still a cliff. So there's other things that we could do around, as Trin was mentioning, disregards, like how much do I get to take off of my income sort of artificially so that I'm not thrown over the limit. Could the maintenance need, that $600, that's super unrealistic because nobody can live on $600 a month, pretty much anywhere now, but definitely not in California and definitely not in Santa Clara.
One thing that we found through Aging University was that that people actually thought that once they got on Medicare, they turned of a certain age and they got on Medicare, that Medicare would actually cover a lot of the expenses for long-term care. And to the point that we actually had people in audiences that would actually argue with us about, oh no, it does cover. It really does. And it's like, no, it really doesn't. It covers a very small amount and only under some very specific circumstances. So then if there's a problem of understanding of what Medicare is going to do and what are our safety nets, right? And if you have people who have been on Medi-Cal, and that's a lot of people, but then you also have people who have not been on there that are all of a sudden going to turn of a certain age and become eligible for Medicare, that have maybe not had as much experience with public assistance, and perhaps don't know that, and what really was evident is that they do not know that there isn't a safety net. So then how do we rally people if people don't really understand these systems, right? So what do we do there? And this is really open for whoever wants to answer this. And actually, I'm going to start with our public elected official here.
When we started the plan, we had this Medi-Cal application form, and people said, well, there's all these people that are committing fraud in welfare, Medi-Cal, and all that kind of stuff. And so we kind of examined this. I said, okay, what is that all about? Well, what it's about is the form. We had a form that was like 10 pages long to fill out for the Medi-Cal application, and for CalWorks, our program there, it was about the same. So if you fill out a 10-page application versus a 2-page application, which we ended up going to, a 2-page application, how many people think that there's going to be more mistakes on a 10-page application than a 2-page application? The Medi-Cal expenditures, they can negotiate, and they spend a lot of administrative costs negotiating the healthcare reimbursements, fee for service. Well, they can bundle these fee for service and say, okay, if it's within this particular range, then that's legitimate expenditure, but if it goes, only if it goes above that particular level, we can challenge or question that expenditure. I think that the public health system, health programs, when we talk about a public option, you know what we're talking about? We're talking about raising the Medi-Cal program to 300, 400% of poverty. This would create a public health plan available, and we should expand the Medi-Cal system so we have enough providers to cover that kind of health plan, a concept that I've heard in the presidential debates. You'll probably hear more about this, but the other one is to lower Medicare down to a lower age level. So lowering one end and raising the other end. Pretty soon, if we do that, you'll find well over half, probably 60% of the public in one of those two plans.
A year and a half ago, I traveled for work. I came home from a trip, like any other trip, and went by to see my mom, and she said to me, I think something's wrong. I need to go to the hospital. You know, I was so taken aback, like, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you tell me this while I was traveling? I didn't want to bother you. So I took her, and she was tested, and she had cancer. She was diagnosed with cancer. And I just remember everything happening so fast that my life was turned upside down so quickly, and hers too, obviously. And that I was extremely privileged to have the job that I had, to have the flexibility that I had to be able to still work, but, you know, take conference calls at the Cancer Care Center. I can't tell you how many conference calls I've had in hospital rooms, sitting in my car, and, you know, running home at lunch to care for my mom and running back to work. And I was able to do that because I have a job that has that level of flexibility. And I was talking to my brother as we both care for my mom, and he said, what if we didn't, and he went to part-time, what if we didn't have the ability and the flexibility to do this? What would happen to our family? And, you know, this is a reality that people are facing every day, whether it's their parents or a child or a relative. And it is part of our life. It's our lived experience. And one of the things I think is so important about our ability to move critical policy is education, of course. We need greater awareness. But we also need to magnify these stories. The way that we make change and the way that people understand how we move in this world is through stories. And we talk about, a lot of us in this work do a lot of storytelling. But how do we actually take that to create a movement? And I think that what's most critical for us are three things. One is to embed storytelling in our work. And I mean the stories of everyday lives that actually move us, that help us understand an issue more deeply than me reciting a statistic, helps us understand how things are interconnected and structural, right? We have to start to advance more structural institutional change. We can't talk about poverty and not talk about institutional structures that drive that. And what we have to combat are these, what we call these predominant frames and narratives that fundamentally do a couple of things. I just talked about caregiving and the fact that a bill that was expanding the ability for people to give and give them more weeks to do that was vetoed by the governor. And the driving force of opposition, of course, was from businesses. And the predominant theme was, this is a job killer. Now, how many issues have we heard as a job killer? That they are job killers. Minimum wage is a job killer. So our work is to combat these narratives because they're so pervasive and so strong that they drive policy decisions. We can only do that by elevating our stories. We can only do that with, on the ground good research too, but elevating our stories and understanding how people think. We call it mental models, right? And we are doing a lot of research around understanding how people think about these issues, because if we don't understand how they think, we can't speak to them. It's It's not just about using fancy words. It's not getting up and trying to, evoke everyone to tears. People just don't operate that. We just don't operate. Our brains don't operate that way. And when we try to give them something that does not meet their mental frame, they clinch down even harder, right? We try to push on that frame and combat it head on. People naturally are even more inclined to say that folks, for example, are cheats, that people make bad decisions. The frame of individualism is the most fundamental American narrative, and it's behind almost every issue we can think about. When we think about why people are poor, or why they might have to even do something, not even understanding a program and saying you have to put out this money that you don't have up front to take care of yourself, the predominant narrative is, wow, people just made bad choices. People don't have retirement because they have made bad choices over their lifetime. We don't talk about the fact that we don't have public pensions anymore. So many people say when we talk about retirement, gosh, I just wish I had saved more. Well, tell me how many of you could save $3 million over your lifetime. It's impossible, right? I think, I talked about this frame of kind of this multi-generational, intergenerational issue, and we were doing some work with folks, younger folks who are just mired in student debt. It's a real entry point. You talk to parents who say, I cannot pay off my debt, save for my child's college education and my retirement at the same time. It's nearly impossible to do, even if you have a good job. So, the keys are for us to fundamentally continue to have good research that elevates the lived experience. It's for us to push out our stories, for us to understand these predominant frames and critically organize. That's the way forward. There's great work in the state, great legal programs like Justice and Aging, and even great coalitions. But everyday citizens, this is our lives, and it impacts all of us. So if we can mobilize, I think we could make much greater progress.
So thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you to the panelists for staying a little bit longer to answer questions. We really appreciate this wonderful conversation that we had.